Hey, this is your average esports podcast, episode 26. Because the other one didn't have audio, so here we are. Too bad. I actually gave the meaning of life in that one, but you'll never hear it ever. So, moving on. We have more important things to do than talking about the meaning of life, which is TI. Because TI8 is coming up. This is the 8th iteration, and with me is Skim as usual. Works for Complexity, and of course, Noxville, the stats expert, right?
Yep, that's me.
Second best stats expert that we have.
Okay.
In the scene.
Oh,
Okay. I thought you guys had like some kind of Highlander thing going where like only one can survive by the end, because like I know Bruno got taken out pretty early, so it's only you and Nahaz left.
Yeah, I guess, and Bulldog also got taken out, so
Yeah,
it's just another person.
Yeah, it's a rough world out there for the analyst. Only one can survive.
I think Reddit says that Grand Grants is the one who's going to win, though.
I am pretty sure it's going to be Kyle, but we will see.
Yeah. Kyle will do anything to win.
Yeah, he is ambitious dude. So to start off, the first thing I think you need to think about when going to TI is actually the patch and the meta, because I haven't looked into it, because like I'm not that great at like theory crafting what's gonna be relevant, what's gonna be good. But do you guys have any kind of like idea?
I think it's difficult to call because there's been such a long. Has there ever been such a long break between like the actual competitive season and like the qualifiers, for example, NTI? It feels like every other. It feels like every other year, at least we've had like a couple of tournaments still going into TI.
Mm-hmm.
We did have the summit, but that was. I can't really take the summit seriously because the teams that were there weren't really prepared. Like some of them just straight up had a vacation going into it.
Yeah.
And the meta there was just all over the place. Like all those Pudge picks, for example, I think at least a good like 80% of those probably wouldn't have happened. Like I could definitely see teams trying out Pudge because there's reasons for why you would want to try out the hero. Like he's been very successful for the past year or years, I guess now in pub games.
Mm-hmm.
And those heroes usually, especially when they get buffed, they usually at some point get pushed into the pro meta, and at some point people just figure out, oh, he's way too strong. Let's just keep picking him. I don't think he's going to be that prevalent of a hero or pick in TI, but I definitely can see him being like a niche sort of like pickup because some of those teams do have really good Pudge players, which is not to be underestimated. But otherwise, I'm not 100% sure what to expect. I think at this point it could be anything. It's really difficult to call, and if previous TIs are an indicator, it will be anything because usually we go in with an idea of a meta, but that one keeps evolving because one or two teams figure out how to play or how to play against that meta, and then teams start developing from there. So I think, if anything, a couple of heroes that I would like to point out, I guess, are like Wind Ranger, for example. I know that Nox, you put as like most picked or most banned for the predictions. Most picked. I can definitely see that because she's become very versatile. Like it's a good sort of like pickup for most teams because most teams have like a good Wind Ranger player, core players as well. We have like what Weeha, Iceberg, some signature Wind Ranger players, Sumail.
I think the problem is just like the other ones. There's a couple of other heroes that are similar in like regarded as such a top pick, but might become more banned. Like Phoenix and Crystal Maiden are definitely, I think, people would say stronger heroes, not necessarily as versatile, but certainly stronger heroes. But we're gonna, I think, see Crystal Maiden be banned a lot more, so it won't get picked as much. I think Wind Ranger is just going to be like, the one that sneaks through.
Oh. Okay. But yeah, so you're basically here in agreement. Knoxville's like it's hard to know because there's like so little data out there.
Yeah, and also the summit. I mean, you have to look at the summit and look at the teams that are at the summit. There's a bunch of them that are going to TI. It was 6 teams, right? And it was Let's Do It who aren't going, and everyone else who is going. So
everybody else has like a reason to hide, or
yeah. But also, like, think about it like this: there's 3 teams there that are NA teams that have played against each other recently, and that's Evil Geniuses, that's Optic, and that's Vici Gaming. And Vici Gaming, which is South America, historically has such a tight association with North America, often playing in the past qualifiers. And then you have Fnatic, who's got Eternal Envy, Universe, Howie 2000 as the coach.
Yes.
Paladai, who's always played with Envy back in Cloud9 when they were, so a lot of these players are just like NA-esque, like they're all America's players that have come together. And there's not really too much you can, I think, gather out of this event because like Skim was saying, it was like the last event just before TI, not necessarily a huge one. I mean, the money was decent, but it is also a summit. It is a event that people want to go to and be able to relax, sit on the couch, lots of casting, but they don't want to give away too much. And I think that there's people who are saying, oh, Optic went 4 and 6 in the groups, and then ended up getting beaten by Fnatic. I wouldn't take like anything out of this. I would just say these are some heroes that were interesting that we saw getting picked there. How's that gonna like update our impression of who's gonna win TI?
I mean, you could tell that this was not necessarily that serious of an event because like PPD just let Meepo through twice because they wanted to see how they could play against it effectively. I think for those teams, it's just basically a little bit of testing, build a little bit of practice, and like Noxville said, because most of these teams know each other very well, like what 3 NA teams, and then like you said with Fnatic, basically like a 4th NA team in a sense. A lot of these teams and players, they just know each other really well already, so that makes the games also very weird. Like whenever teams that know each other play against one another, like if they know each other really well, that completely creates like a whole new game because they're not going to be like really meta, like playing the meta anymore, but rather playing against each other, right? That's why. So if you go into TI, you like even if you're at TI, if EG plays Optic, you will still see probably like an EG versus Optic kind of game, no matter what that meta is going to be like at that point. Odds are it's going to. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's the thing is that like. The only thing that I got out of this whole event was EG just looked super solid. Like they dropped one game pretty early on against Let's Do It. I didn't watch the game, so I don't know. And then they lost the last series against Fnatic, where they were already guaranteed to be through. They were 7-1, and the last series didn't matter at all. They lost against Fnatic, and then they just destroyed 2-0, 3-0. So. Although I said earlier that there's not much you can get out of this, I think that like EG, this did mean a lot for EG to look solid. So this was a good tournament for them, and I think that it updates and improves like the perception that people have of EG coming forward into TI.
Yeah, I know that Crit did an interview where it basically said Sumail thought like this could be their year, like they could win this one. But I'm pretty sure like everybody thinks it's their year every year, like most of the time, right? Like, assuming you're among the top teams, and EG, while they don't have the results, like, on paper, like, the potential is pretty crazy. If you just look at the individual pieces on this squad. So, yeah, I can see that. I can see, it does feel like they were the most solid team there, even though there's, like, a billion different caveats running around in that particular tournament. But, yeah. Like, at least in the pure fundamental sense, I thought EG was good at that tournament.
Yeah, for me, their event, like they look pretty solid in the qualifiers, but this actual event maybe pushes them in my head to top 8.
Okay.
For me,
I think that's something that most of the people either don't agree with or think it's like ludicrous.
Okay.
Just to quickly respond to that, like this is the year kind of thing, which I think what makes me, I guess, or if I had to make an argument or a case for EG this year as a potential TI winner, or at least like a top 3 contender, I guess, is the fact that we haven't really seen like a peak performance this year. Like we haven't really seen like a good, like super EG this year, right? And TI ultimately is just one event. You only need to peak once at TI, and that's it.
So you
we've
think
seen numerous. No. I'm saying we've seen numerous teams just go like they've had like one good performance in a year, and it was at TI.
Yeah.
DC,
right? CDEC. Like you could make arguments that they've played somewhat well before, but still, like we've seen numerous teams at TI that did definitely only played on like one super good event, and it happened to, or it was TI. So in that sense, EG has been playing awful this year. Yeah, they won a minor, but whatever. we still have to see a good EG, and this team is sort of like developing still. And I think TI is like a very forgiving tournament in that sense because it runs for such a long time. So if you're as a team sort of like in the groove and you're like finding yourself right now, if you're in that process, I think that group stage can really help. Yeah. As long as you survive it, that is. And then, like, again, I think it's a very forgiving tournament because it's like a double elim as well. I assume. Is the format actually already out? I don't know.
Yeah,
format's
best of 2 round robin into double elimination.
Oh, right. No, I saw that.
First round is best 1 in lower brackets.
So, yeah, I think TI is a very forgiving format in that sense. So, a team like EG right now, I think, is in a very prime position to, like Ben said, I think top 8 is very realistic for this team. And I think top 6 would be a good finish. And, well, we'll see.
Anything
we'll see
above
about
that is discredit. Anything below that is you fucked up again, EG, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, the way I always like when it comes to like where do you think these teams are going to end, I always look at like the field and I choose the teams that are like the worst because those are the 2 worst teams are going to get eliminated. And maybe we can do this as like an exercise later. And then I like just say like, do you think this is going to be top 8 or bottom 8? And then you just like split them into, and then you repeat for each section. Yeah. It's like it's very difficult. I think if you like have to just like off the top of your head name who's going to come first, and then you look at the whole list again. I think that you often just get like sidetracked by 1 or 2 teams.
Yeah. All right. So that's actually what I was going to do. So we may as well go into it then. So the very bottom tier, which is going to be the 2 eliminated. I call this the Shanghai Dragons tier, the 0-40 tiers, as it were. So which of these 2 teams do you think are going to get eliminated?
IG.
I think Pain and IG are like where it's at.
Pain and IG.
You really have Pain that low?
I don't know, man. Listen. I don't want to believe in it too much, but Misery does have this thing where like vengeance does fuel him in a sense. So
that's true.
Like,
I think IG is the one that like most people would say is at the bottom, but then who else is with them? Is it going to be like was Serenity's run during qualifiers just
luck?
Was it like luck, or was it just like super specific set of teams that they understand very well? So, or is it going to be Vici Thunder, who basically earned almost all their points very, very early on, and then kind of failed later on? Vici Thunder like only made it, the super major. They made it through 1 round. They beat Final Tribe, Europeans, lol. I don't know. Like Vici Thunder just didn't look super good at all. I think the only teams they beat in the whole event were Infamous, and that was it. I think it was like Infamous and then Final Tribe, and then they lost.
Because that's my actual second pick. I think all 3 of us pick IG, right?
Yeah.
My second pick was going to be VJ Thunder. Like, I really don't believe in this team at all. I really don't believe in this team at all.
I think Pain's got way more potential, I think, from what we've seen. But there's so many things coming in, like there's this long gap. You see, like looking at the players on VGJ Thunder, you have ROTK as the coach, DDC, Freeze, Sylar. Like these are not like complete unknown players. These are people that have looked solid, especially Sylar. Like Sylar's been pretty insane in the past. And it's just something hasn't clicked, and this could just be the event that they click. So I think it's like riskier in some sense to eliminate them over Pain, but from what we've seen,
but I mean, would you eliminate them over Serenity? Because that's like the other choice, right?
Yeah, I think that's Serenity. Like, yeah. Oh, I don't know. I haven't thought enough about that.
It's hard, right? Because I think there's like arguments for all of them to be a Shanghai Dragon, but only one of them must be. Can be.
Well, yeah. I mean, it would be a pretty big slap in the face, like regardless that we're discussing for the bottom 2 teams to be IG and then one of Serenity, VGJ, Pain. Think about that. Yeah. Imagine 2 China at the bottom.
I mean,
I would love that.
That would be hilarious and all, but it's like there is this thing about fucking China. It's like every time TI comes around, they do like level up, right? But
yeah,
I can't believe in that forever. Well, just like I can't believe like Misery's somehow gonna like put his like revenge driven soul into like the Brazilian players and go win, right? So it's like
The problem is that it doesn't really matter who we think the worst two teams are. Like we can all decide who we think the worst team is.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, it depends on what the groups are, because there's two groups of 9. Bottom team that gets eliminated. So if Pain and IG are in the same group, they both can't get eliminated.
That's true.
So like that's in my head. That's like the part that's nagging, is that like you have to choose one per group, and then even then it's like, you know, the bottom's very close. Like if it's Serenity, VGJ, Thunder, who are you gonna choose to lose? Like then it's even a 50-50. So I think IG, and beyond that we should just choose symbolically one of the other two, and I'm gonna just say VGJ Thunder.
Okay. What about you, Skim?
Yeah, I'm also on VGJ Thunder, but I will say that it is very unlikely that both of them are gonna get eliminated, like as the first two teams, because I think both teams have at least experience going for them, if not like actual skill, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And traditionally speaking, if you look at past TIs, there's always been, like, at the bottom, there's always been a team that was new to, basically, to the circuit, or new to TI, right? It's always been like newcomers that get dropped out, some of the qualifier teams especially. So I think Serenity is so that's why I would probably, like, I would go with VGJ Thunder, but just because of that, I would go rather with Serenity or even Windstrike. I know that Windstrike has played good events going into the TI. Obviously, they played a good qualifier, and they had what, Epicenter, or was it, where they placed third.
Yeah.
But still, I think obviously they are new to the circuit. Either they're, you know, some of them are veterans with Silent and Always Want to Fly. I guess No Fear and Iceberg have been around for a long time as well. But I still think that Windstrike, to me, is, out of all the teams right now, the most vulnerable one, sort of. Aside from like VGJ Thunder, IG, and Serenity.
It's a bit weird for you to say that, though, in my opinion, because the groups are best of 2, and even though there is definitely exception at best of 2s and best of 1s and best of 3s. Like as soon as you take that step to best of 3, everything kind of changes. So, you know, like in a best of 3, you very rarely do a best of 3 in a group stage, and in that sense, the first game almost doesn't matter because it's all about the ability to adapt. Yeah. So your ability to change makes a big difference. But I think Windstrike is a team that definitely could just win like cheeky games here and there off the top team in one of their 2 games. I think that they'll just win a game. Except I wouldn't be.
Hello. Right, sorry about that. My internet disconnected. But basically, we were talking about the trash teams of TI, just because somebody's got to get eliminated first. Somebody's got to go meet Machine, the ferryman, on the way to the Abyss, and we all agree IG is most likely of all the teams. And then each of us had a different prediction initially. I started with VGJ Thunder. Nox was thinking about Pain, but eventually came to the light and thought VGJ Thunder, and then Skim's like, probably Serenity. Just because they're
Windstrike.
Oh, Windstrike, was it? Windstrike, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. Right, so Windstrike, that's actually a pretty decent choice too, all things considered. So now we're going to move up to the next tier, and let's go with the bottom 8, I guess, would be the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And then let's see here. I'm going to assume we all agree, like Windstrike, Serenity, VGJ Thunder, Pain Gaming, whichever one of these you didn't pick for your initial like bottom 2 are going to be in like the bottom 4 of the bottom 8.
Yeah.
Right?
I could see Pain getting like a 9th to 12th kind of thing, but I definitely have them top 8, bottom 8.
This is bottom 8. Yeah,
bottom 8.
Just bottom 8 in general. Yeah.
But like those are like definitely the 4 teams that are like locks for bottom 8, so to say.
Sure.
For now.
Yeah.
Oh, well, wait, did you say, I mean, isn't it 5 teams?
Yeah, those like 5 teams. Like, but
Yeah,
basically like 2 of them are like bottom 17 to 18th.
Sure.
Then like
so that's like
the following 3
so we need
are
to choose 5 more.
Yeah, so you need to choose 5 more among the remaining teams. So
Okay.
I'll go first. I'm gonna say it. I think Mineski is probably in here.
I don't agree with that.
You don't
I
agree
agree
with
with
that?
that. I agree with that.
Okay.
I think you can make a case that Mineski are right around the cusp of top 8.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there are teams that are worse than Mineski.
All right.
I am a certified Mineski hater, so I'm gonna put Mineski in there as well.
I mean, you need to choose 5 teams, right? And I don't think Mineski is like bottom 5 of the remaining teams.
Okay, I'll definitely choose Newbie actually.
Yeah, okay,
I'm going with Newbie for sure.
I could get behind Newbie being bottom 8.
This team has like declined very steadily, like like basically like the fucking polar ice caps, like they're just like melting slowly, except it's accelerating at this point. And then by the end of TI, there will be nothing left. That's my prediction for Newbie.
I think you're all underestimating Newbie. I think Newbie is actually going to be like top 6 or whatever. So I actually have them top 8. So
see, the problem for me is that the reason that Newbie I think was so good for so long was that they were within China. They were like consistent, and they were making it to every event. They were doing all the good things, and recently they've just been outshone by other Chinese teams. So maybe you're right, Skim. Maybe we're thinking Newbie is not that solid, but I think part of the reason certainly is just because the other Chinese teams have come up and started like destroying them. Like Vici Gaming, for example. Like Newbie used to destroy them. Like throughout the early part of the season, I remember watching so many games where, like the games where Vici won, it was like, during a group stage or something. It's like yes, but whenever it was like a serious match, Newbie seemed super consistent. But one of the games that I remember watching was the Super Major, and I watched a fair amount of the group stage, but I like some of the groups I just didn't care about. Like I didn't watch them at all in Group A. Like I watched Liquid play. I think I watched Liquid destroy Newbie, and that was like done and dusted. And Newbie even dropped a game against Team Spirit, which was like I saw the result for that. I'm like, should I watch the series? And I was like, no, I actually don't care that much. And I watched Group B and then you get to the playoffs, and Newbie beat VGJ Thunder. Super good. We all think VGJ Thunder is not that good. But then they got utterly crushed by by Vici Gaming. It was like, yeah, to me, it just seems that, like, if you're a Chinese team that wants to do well at an event like this, you have to be, like, super dominant over the other Chinese team. And that was what's so weird about TI7, was that there were 3 teams that from China that did so well, despite being, like having such a close rivalry against each other. So I feel like they've just dropped the ball too much. And they don't have that dynamic anymore. Like China's not as strong as it was. So being unable to be like dominant in China is just not going to cut it right now.
All right. Oh, I missed the obvious one, I suppose. But yeah, you got any counters for that, Skim? Why do you think Newbie's going top 6?
I don't necessarily. I agree to a certain extent that China's not as strong as it was anymore, and in that sense, unless you're like at the top of China, it's going to be very difficult to make like top 6, for example, or like top 4. I think it's definitely. I know this is going out of that discussion already. Like I'm going way ahead of myself here, but I think top 3, top 4 is like a very set formula for all of us, effectively, right? Like,
yeah.
We all have pretty much the same teams in that group. But below that, I think it's such an open field, and I think what is going to decide that is, in my opinion, both sort of like mental sort of fortitude and experience going forward. Like being able to win out these drawn out games, being able to sort of no matter whether you're 1-0 behind or not, you're gonna always be able to play your own game. I think it's gonna be very important. And yeah, maybe in a direct matchup against Vici Gaming, Newbie might be the weaker team. Even though I don't actually think so. Yeah, they did get crushed at the Super Major, but I think that just happens. Like just because Newbie, for example, beat Liquid that one tournament in like what Genting was it?
Yeah.
I don't think they're better than Liquid. Not saying that you're making that argument, but my point is that I think Super Major in that sense was a bit of a fluke for Newbie, even though I do think Newbie has declined in terms of skill. But I still think that like their fundamentals are make them a very scary team. Even if they lose this laning stage, they still know how to play from behind. Like their high ground hold, their base defense is really scary. And I think at TI especially because TI tends to have very intense sort of like games, and that's where like pressure really gets to certain teams. I think Newbie is one of those teams that doesn't necessarily get crushed by pressure that easily because the way they approach the game, they basically put pressure on themselves from minute one because they rarely draft to like win all 3 lanes, and in that sense they're always under pressure and they always prevail. And I think that's like that attitude and that mental fortitude is really going to help them be at least top 8, and that's why I think they're also going to make top 6. But again, it's difficult to call because depending on the matchup, like if you pull a VP last year, you face LGD and Liquid in like round
basically the top 3 teams. Yeah.
Yeah, if you face 2 of them, you're wrecked. So it's difficult to call, but I think in terms of current skill level, I still have them top 8, almost top 6-ish.
Like I think I agree with you. Like it is super close about where they
land,
whether or not they can make top 8. Sorry, my legs going wild. It needs to turn off. But yeah, I think that it's like you're totally right when you say it's super close about just below the top 8 or just around the top 8. There's like 4 teams or 5 teams that are like all kind of head on head, equal in skill, equal in potential, and could break through. My impression is that Newbie could be there. Newbie could be on par with, for example, Mineski, who I think is maybe like around 7th or 8th. And I think it's like the structure is so weird this year because in the past it's like there's always like one team or 2 teams coming into TI which is like far beyond everyone else, and then they always fail. And then there's always like this cluster around like top 6 who's gonna get in. Whereas this time I think the whole cluster is around the 8th position or 9th position. That's where it's at, and that's like to me super weird. And because of how double elimination works, like you said, it's like all about who meets who when. And I think that for Newbie, this could be really good or it could be really bad. Too hard to say.
To me, it also feels like we've never had a TI before where we've had like such a dominant like field of like top 4 teams.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's. I think it's top 3. Let's
yeah. Let's say top 3. Like it's never been that obvious that these 3 teams are without a doubt the best 3 teams in the world. Like we've had favorites before, but we've never, or like teams that could potentially upset the favorites.
But it's only been like 1 or 2. Like
it feels.
That was the thing about TI7 was that it was the year where the favorite coming in actually won.
TI7 was
was Liquid.
Oh yeah, Liquid was the favorite. Yeah.
Like if you think about TI5. It was supposed to be secret, and they got they didn't just fail; they got like dumpstered.
Yeah.
TI6, it was supposed to be TI6. TI6 was a little bit open.
No, it was supposed to be OG or Liquid though, like as not as dominant as like secret, but like they were the favorites.
I think OG definitely were the favorites because they had won the 2 majors going into it.
Yeah. It was OG and Liquid, and both got kind of dumpstered, and then TI4 was the DK.
DK EG, I think. Actually, I don't know if EG is necessarily there, but it's like kind of.
And TI3, TI3 it was
Alliance.
Like the Alliance, that's expected, right? Like,
yeah.
Like I guess if we straight up run the numbers, it's like the favorite, so to say, like made it to like the finals like 2 out of 8 times almost. That's pretty.
Navi was definitely the favorites at TI1.
I am not counting TI1.
I'm pretty sure. I actually think Ehon were the favorites.
Like I don't think anybody actually knows who the favorites were.
No, the favorites were Navi because Navi got access to the game.
Oh yeah, you're right.
The Chinese teams didn't even know if it was a scam or whether it was serious. Like the Chinese teams were still playing Dota 1 officials.
But I mean,
like.
Even if we count
a week and a half, 2 weeks before TI.
Even if we count that, like that fact that TI is like so different from the rest of the TIs. It's not really like the same category in my opinion.
Yeah.
But like,
I think IG was also
Tier
regarded
two.
actually, IG
IG
was pretty good, right?
IG was a favorite.
So it's more like 30 to 40% of the time the favorite makes it.
But that's the thing, though. I feel like there haven't been that many TIs where you could definitely single out like a team or like multiple teams and be like, they are without a doubt like top 3 teams. Like you wouldn't be surprised to see all of these 3 teams, and you wouldn't find teams that everybody would agree with as well. Like maybe 1 team, but not 3 teams. And I find it very difficult to believe that not everybody that follows Dota 2 competitively doesn't believe that these 3 teams are the best 3 teams in the world right now.
Yeah.
And that makes the whole like balance shift so weird. Like just to get back to what Noxville alluded to earlier, like we have this, like you said, we have this cluster on like the 8th, 9th place where we have a lot of these teams that have sort of been bouncing around these kind of things, and it makes it really difficult to call like bottom 8, top 8. But that's also what makes it interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because I agree actually with I totally understand Ben's point about Newbie, not like why he doesn't pick them for top 8, and I totally get that. But you know, I do think that they are a top 8 contender. But I
mean,
I guess this is
I can't put them above top 6 personally, but it's like I can see them again top 8.
No.
Like here's the problem: is like there's so many of them. These teams that are like within the like 12 to 6 range. There's like a lot of teams within like 12 to 5 range, I guess. So, I guess let's take out the one team I'm pretty sure all of us agree is not going to make it to top 8, Team OG. Right?
Yeah,
like,
unfortunately.
Listen, I actually think they actually have like a lot of smarts, like a lot of like great ideas about Dota, but they don't have this. They don't have the time and they don't have the skill.
Yeah, I think that like bringing Anna back was like genius. Like the only way they make it, but I don't. Yeah, I agree. I think it's too short, really.
I feel like if they had brought Anna back before, instead of like getting, after they kicked
the resolution, they should have gotten.
Yeah, I think they should have gotten Anna back immediately. I understand why they didn't. There were reservations regarding, there were legitimate concerns why they didn't play with Anna. But I feel like they wasted a lot of time, and that kind of like split the team apart. I wasn't surprised. Like when they split, obviously I was surprised, but in a sense I wasn't surprised because it made a lot of sense for the two players to split, because they never really like. No offense to Mad, to Sebastian, whatever. He's a good player, but that's not a solution. Having him as a mid player was not a solution, or like a whatever player. So him now being on the offlane and having Anna and Thompson is great. And like, if this was the team halfway through the season, I would have much more confidence into this team. But yeah, like you guys said, way too short. Not a lot of experience on 2 very crucial positions, both Anna and Thompson. Like Anna has played a TI before. It sounds ludicrous to say not a lot of experience, but the fact that he was basically absent for most of the season makes it very difficult for me to have any sort of like faith in him. And that's why I think like in a high level performance, not having at least one core player to rely on, like if they had only one of those 2 and the other one was say Resolution, for example, and
you could believe in Resolution, like,
yeah. I would, or it doesn't even have to be like Resolution, just any sort of like consistent player that you know that what you're gonna get out of. But in a high pressure situation where maybe both of their lanes don't go their way, maybe one of them gets like picked off in the mid game, very unfortunately, I just have my issues like believing those two players carrying them. And then,
well, that was basically what it was all about in the old OG. Was everyone in the team was sacrificing to make Anna's game good. So they give him a hero, which is like a hyper carry of some kind. He chooses the lane that he wants, and it's like kind of like ranked, but he gets in the game first, and he can put his icon down, and he can choose his hero, and he can pick last. Like that's the kind of thing, and I don't think that the current OGs like that. Like you say, like the people aren't as versatile. They aren't able to just like set him up for success. So,
and I mean, they're just. Pretty much everything speaks against this OG team, right? They form very late. They have a newcomer in Thompson, and they have Anna, who has been again absent for most of the season. Mad, who hasn't played competitively in 3 years almost. No Tail, who's played carry for the last 2 years and now playing the 5th position, despite playing 4 position beforehand.
And then it's like fucking Matt's like second role change also. Like, what do you want?
Exactly, like he exactly in previous squads he played like what support, he played carry. I mean, he's played offlane before, but still, it feels like everything speaks against this OG team. So as much as I want to see them succeed, I think this is a bottom 8 pick for sure.
Mm-hmm. Also, like an interesting side point about this OG teams, like if you watch CS:GO, this actually reminds me a lot of what happened to Optic at the last year from like the first half of 2017. Where Stanislaw left for Team Liquid, and then all they did was like they just stood around like, it's okay, we'll eventually find the perfect fifth eventually. We'll eventually find the perfect fifth eventually. And then Tarek's like, fuck this, I am out. Like after like 6 months of like waiting for a fifth that never came, and that's basically what happened with OG. They're like, it literally felt like they're like, we're just gonna wait around until we get the perfect fifth. What you actually should have done was just get a good fifth, whichever one would work for your team. But instead, like they just waited around, and then eventually, when like the opportunity knocked, when EG accepted the fact that they needed a fucking leader that wasn't Misery, they took Fly in S4. Like, it makes complete sense. Like, what was the line? Like, the perfect is the enemy of the good, or whatever. Like, that's basically what happened with OG.
Can you stop channeling your inner Sun Tzu?
Yeah. Okay. but yeah, it's an interesting team. In that sense, because I feel like this is the team you're supposed to study if you're a general manager of any other team, because then this will teach you not to do this, right? So even though I think OG actually has like the structure and like the leaders and like the mind to make a good team in the future, this isn't the event. Like they've basically like wasted this year, so hopefully next year they learn a thing or two about that. All right, here's an interesting one then. TNC, where do you put them?
I put them in part of that cluster.
The cluster of like death or like eco. Yeah. Top bottom 12 and top 6.
So that's the thing is I wrote this in the group, but the way my like kind of impressions coming into this is that you have those top 3, and then you have 5 teams that are like going to fill out the top 8, and it's like kind of a split between them. And then you have like a huge cluster of 5 teams from 9 to 14 or whatever. So 9 to 13. And then you have the teams below that, which is what we've discussed, and then the teams that lost that we think are going to eliminate. Yeah. So I think that TNC are part of that cluster that are like just below, bubbling on simmer below top 8. And if they perform better than we expect, they're going to make top 8. If one of the top 8 teams performs much worse than we expect, then they're ready to pounce. Yeah. I think that what's going to be the most brutal round at this TI is going to be your like losers bracket round 1, best of ones. Because it's going to be, if you like the way I have it in my head, there's 5 teams that are just below top 8. So these 5 teams are all going into the losers bracket round 1. And what do you know about the losers bracket round 1? It's best of 1, and there's 4 of them. So 4 of these teams are going to be playing, or there are 4 matches and there's 5 teams. So one of these teams is potentially going to be playing a best of 1 elimination against one of the others. And the teams I have here are, like we've said, TNC and OG and Newbie as well. 3 teams that we've discussed so far. Skim thinks Newbie can break into top 8. I think that's not unreasonable. But if what I can tell you don't want to do is be just outside top 8. You'd much rather be the 8th. Like the difference between 8th and 9th coming out of groups is going to be monumental. It's
basically the difference between like 1 game and like potentially 6 games, right?
Yeah, exactly. You'd much rather be. People say it all the time, like, oh, you don't want to be 8th in the group in the playoffs because then you play off against whatever Liquid or VP, a top team. Like, screw that. You definitely want to lose to them and go down into to where you're playing best of 3. It's actually a weird thing. The Super Major had a better format than TI. Like, if you think about it, like how insane is that? It's like on the DPC just before TI, it's got most of the top teams, like a couple missing, but it's got like whatever of the top 12 probably got like 8 of the teams right, or 9 of the teams, and yeah, they have a better format than TI.
I mean, this is a bit, I guess, a little bit off topic, but I really love the fact that we have tournaments that rival TI in terms of quality, be it format, be it production, be it whatever. Because ultimately, that's the only way TI itself is going to improve, by having other tournaments set the standard. Like, TI needs competition in that sense. And I mean,
I disagree. I think that TI doesn't need competition. TI just needs to become less important in the year.
Well, yeah, that would help as well. But I mean, you know,
I think TI needs to downscale, not upscale, to try.
But like, no, but the thing is, like, yeah, I agree, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. Or ultimately, I mean, it will happen at some point.
I don't even know how you get that to happen.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is you like say that, like, the first thing is to reduce the prize money, because it's insane.
But I mean, like it's community funded. Like, they're not going to stop that part, right?
No, well, they could just say that the prize money for TI, like 20% gets spread out for EPC events over the next year.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, because
like they have, or you have more teams at TI and the money is spread a bit better.
Yeah, because
that's the thing is, like, if you think about, like, if you look at like esports earnings for the teams,
it's like super rich.
The players who've won the most money, it's like of the top 50, it's like 48 or something.
Yeah, it's something ridiculous. Insane. But like, here's like the not necessarily criticism, but like the problem I see is, like, I don't know Valve as a company, but like you look at the other esports companies, Riot, Blizzard, etc. Like they all go for like the big headline, right? And there's no bigger headline than, like, oh look, we got a 23 million prize pool tournament. It's like,
yeah, that's true. I mean, that's the problem, is that, like, Valve is a company, they want to make money, nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, that doesn't necessarily align with, like, the long-term interests of the game, or even the short-term interests of the game.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just, you know, people are like, there's different incentives in play for different different people. And for Valve, like, Valve have said this before, they view esports as marketing. So it's like, the reason that they held TI1 is they didn't want to spend $1 million on advertising Dota2 and making all these like posters and TV commercials, and, you know, I want to say like the League of Legends approach.
Yeah. But
they decided, let's rather just put $1 million in, or like $2 million, or whatever the costs were,
into that tournament.
Into a tournament, and that's been their like paradigm, is that esports is just a method of marketing for a game. So yeah, I think that's just like the difference, really.
Yeah, it's a pretty extreme model. It's like not necessarily good or bad. It's just what it is. So.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we'll move back to the topic at hand, which is TI. So where do you have VGJ Storm? Same cluster, basically.
Yeah, I think that like dirty cluster involves, for me, is VGJ Storm, Newbie, OG, TNC, and Optic.
And Optic, yeah, makes sense.
I think Optic are like also like they're a team which is super skilled. They in some ways they haven't clicked, and they obviously took it a step up when they started doing well at these like certain events. But remember that, like, also the big thing about TI is that coming into TI, you have this time when the patch is kind of changing slowly and slowly and slowly. Like, even last year, the patch that was played at for the international was, you know, like, it was something E. What was it, like 707E, 706E? So the small minor patches are like almost exactly the same as the major patches now in terms of size. So you're getting these changes, you know, as Ice Rogue ramps it up for TI, and like everyone's kind of holding thumbs that it's not going to be like a TI4 meta where someone just breaks it, because it's beyond there's no way to patch the game now. There's no, oh, we can't nerf Death Ball, or, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
So there's all these small changes that happen, you know, over the months before, and I think that Optic always did well. Like, Optic's performance was highly correlated to which heroes were good in the meta and which weren't. And yeah, I think that at the moment there's some heroes which just don't suit them like super hard. And that's just like, and also what's going to happen is, as we know with every TI, there's always a big meta shift. So if the meta shifts in a specific way, it could help them out. If it doesn't, it's just going to stay bad for them. So yeah, there's quite a lot of like variables being thrown around, and I hope that for Optic's sake, that they can move the patch into a way that they can like play a decent Dota.
See, I don't even think that the patch is really going to be an issue for them. I think for them, in my book, is the fact that they like if you've ever listened into me and Steven talk about Optic, you'll notice that I have a specific thing that I constantly criticize about them, and it's the fact that they don't have the individual skill to really back up their game, specifically in the mid position.
You don't think CCNC is?
I think that one of the big issues for me with Optic is that CCNC is consistently one of the weaker mid players at any given event. Yeah, that's how low I rate him. I do think he's gotten better, and he's definitely not as big of a liability anymore. But in like, once it gets to like the really like big matchups, right? Especially in the playoffs, I feel like that's where he could become a huge liability. And I feel like they just need to be able to make him comfortable while still making sure that 3-3 and Zai can sort of do their thing, what they usually do on the offlane together. And in my opinion, that's difficult because usually you want somebody like Zai or PPD or even 3-3 in a sense to alleviate some of the pressure. And you can alleviate that pressure by applying pressure elsewhere, and that's sort of what they've been doing for a while now. You know, having 3-3 and Zai being really active on the offlane. But I just wonder, and I guess in that sense, it kind of does come back to the meta and to the patch. If CC, I don't know what's the word in my throat right now.
Just choking like CCNC.
I'm just choking like CC. I don't know if like. So oftentimes, for example, they pick in heroes like DK, for example, heroes that are difficult. Like they don't necessarily need like a successful landing stage to still be successful or impactful. That still can do their job. Razor, you know, heroes that are still very useful and that have a bit of an easier time. That's a very appropriate name. And in that sense, I guess it does kind of rely on the meta, but in a lot of ways, to me, it's just, you know, can they continue doing that for CCNC as the, you know, competition gets more intense. I do think I actually have them as a top 8 team right now, if that makes it. Despite all my concerns, I do have them as a top 8 team. I know you have them sort of like these sort of like almost top 8. Yeah, so, the 9 cluster.
So the thing is that this like central cluster would actually it's actually really weird because I have Fnatic just above, and that's kind of weird if you think about it, because every time like Optic and Fnatic meet, Optic win.
Yes.
So
yeah,
that's because PPD owns Eternal Envy's soul. Like the anime shit can't hurt him.
But that's the thing. That's the thing that we've sort of like alluded to earlier as well, is that specific matchups are very meta independent and are very like just because Optic beats Fnatic all the time doesn't necessarily mean that Optic is a better team. I do think actually that Optic is the better team, but I still think that Fnatic has generally good matchups overall that make it good enough for also like a top 8. So I have both of them actually as top 8.
Yeah, that's the thing is like when, for example, when Optic play Virtus Pro, like there's like this separation that's right. There's like a divide, and you have Optic and you have Virtus Pro, and for most of your money's worth, you're always gonna go Virtus Pro in that matchup.
Yep.
Like Virtus Pro are like a league ahead.
They're like 9-1 odds or some shit.
Yeah, when it's like when you're talking about Optic versus Fnatic, Optic have pretty consistently beaten Fnatic in that I've seen. It's like Birmingham, and there was also the event that Optic won, which was the Starlight of 5, which basically was like mostly bad teams. I want to say was not impressive teams. If you look at the teams, there were 8 of them, and if you look at the ones that are at TI, You have Vici Thunder who are right at the bottom. You have Fly to Moon who are like towards the bottom, and then you have Navi, Kingwin, SG, Vega, and it's like Fnatic and Optic. So it was like pretty low tier in terms of like overall skill. And on top of that, like Newbie was actually supposed to be there, but that's like, but Vici Thunder replaced them. SG were playing with a sub. LGD were the ones that pulled out and let Vega in. You know, like there was, and even Fnatic, you had Adam playing for Paladin. It was that like experimental phase.
Mm-hmm.
So the like tournament was like super doggo, and Optic, like, you know, Optic's routes to the finals involved beating Fnatic and Vici Thunder, who are like I said, like the Optic Fnatic rivalry continues, but you know, it was like a super easy tournament, I think, for Optic to win, and they'll be very like it gives them a big morale boost, which is great moving forward. But overall, it's like there's not much that you actually learn from looking at a tournament like that. Like it's entertaining to watch, but like the outcome doesn't like teach you that much about the actual individual skill of the players or the teams. And for me, it would have been so much better if we had those original teams, if Newbie and LGD were there, and Optic were able to play against them in like a small, close tournament where you can prepare. You have all this time to prepare. You have like clear teams that are worse than you, like Kingwin and SG, and yeah, you're just able to focus on like the hard matchups. That would have been so good to watch from a perspective of Optic Gaming, and we kind of were like a bit let down. And then the Super Major comes up, and Optic are right back in it. You know, they bounce back. So I agree with what Skim's saying, that you could definitely, like Fnatic might have a better performance against selection of teams, and in individual matchups, Optic are better than Fnatic.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very like that. Like even though I've made this kind of like tier 3 cluster of 5 teams, and there's a tier 2 cluster above them. That is like those are so sandwiched together. Those could easily change, and that's why making top 6 prediction is so hard, because Newbies in the same situation. They could just bounce right up and in their top 6. It's actually like disgusting how close it is.
Not only that, but like these teams we're talking about, like all of them, like they don't necessarily play each other a bunch. You know what I mean? Like you kind of like implied it there as like, yeah, we've never seen Optic play against LGD. I don't think we've ever seen them play against Newbie or Vici. I think like we haven't seen them play against a bunch of teams, and we can say the same about a lot of these different teams.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of like it is going to come down to a lot to like the matchup, like whether or not it's like a historical matchup or whether it's like one where like you've never seen before. And those are the ones where it's like it's much harder to know what's going to happen, especially because we don't even know what the meta is yet, right? And
yeah, I mean that's kind of one of the things about how the DPC system has worked, is that for most of the Western events where you have like lots of Western teams, it's like always 1 or 2 Chinese teams.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you have like an event in China, you have like 6 Chinese teams. So you get so much more information about, like, even though how the system is supposed to be like international, you have way more information, like 3 or 4 times more about China versus China than China versus West.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like what makes this middle so difficult, really. It's because you have Vici Thunder, who we've seen a bunch of times get crushed by both internal and external, and they're on the edge. And then you have VP and Liquid, and LGD, who play, you know, both inside and outside of the region, and they crush. And then in the middle, it's like you have things like Optic, and Newbie and VGJ Storm and EG, like a lot of NA teams, a lot of SCA teams, who they play a bunch against each other, but their performance against external teams is like very, very difficult, because NA and SCA both got screwed over the most, I want to say, of any region when it came to just free invites. Like EG got a bunch of invites that they didn't deserve, but beyond that, it was like NA, like, you know, VGJ Storm and Optic were always fighting. You have Fnatic and Mineski and TNC, who are always fighting for those slots, and they never got a break. And now we're at TI, and it's so hard to differentiate between them.
It's actually a big issue in general, is that there's such a big discrepancy in terms of like what kind of information we have. Like there's a certain amount of information like you said, there's certain information that we have, for example, China versus China, but we have so much of it. Whereas if you look, for example, Liquid versus Secret, we've had a lot of it actually early on in the season because they clashed against one another, right? Mm-hmm. But ever since then, it's like gone. Like
Yes.
so it feels like I know
They played at Super Major.
Huh? Well,
They played
yeah,
at
but
Super Major.
I'm just just saying, like, there's not a lot. For example, like Team Liquid in general, just because they get invited to a lot of events, and even at those events, they get far, but it doesn't really feel like we know as much. For example, Liquid versus like certain other teams as much as we do between like Vici Gaming and Newbie, for example. And that makes it very difficult to, especially because like Ben said, between regions. And on top of that, teams keep changing. So OG versus any team is like has never basically never happened. But yeah, I guess this is also what makes TI so interesting. The fact that we do have these different teams from all around the world clashing. But yeah, that makes predicting it much more difficult. And on top of that, that's where the meta comes in, like the new meta. And on top of that, that's also where matchup. So this is really difficult. But to get back, I guess, to the original point, I think Ben at least agreed with me that Optic is better than Fnatic.
Head to head, or just overall?
I mean, head to head, they definitely win against Fnatic every time.
Yeah. Optic are definitely better, but like that, the thing is that Fnatic have actually just played a bunch more against other
teams, and that's why we know more about them against other teams than we do for Optic. Yeah, no.
So maybe that's the way in which we should phrase that big clusterfuck of 8 teams. Is that the reason that I have EG, Mineski, Fnatic higher than VCJ, Storm, Newbie, Optic, OG, TNC is just because I think we have more information against a wider selection of teams.
That's fair.
All right, so basically we've all come to the conclusion like the middle is really fucked in this TI. Like there's way too many like it's very hard to differentiate between like 8 and 9 basically, right? Or 6 and 7.
Yeah.
So I want you to give me, among this entire clusterfuck then, give me like the 2 or 3 teams you think of that entire clusterfuck are going to make like top 6 or better.
Like a miracle run, basically.
Yeah. Like among this entire clusterfuck of teams, like which 3 are you choosing?
I mean, I think that like I don't know if you're including or excluding like Secrets.
I'm excluding Secret. I think Secret's like here's how I rank them. All right. Obviously, we all agree Virtus Pro, Liquid, LGD above the rest, right?
Yeah, sure.
Then I think there's like half a tier below them, which is Secret, and then half a tier below that, which is like the clusterfuck I'm talking about.
I think that it's like I think Vici is very close to Secret.
Yeah, Vici might be very close to Secret. It's harder to say with them.
Yeah, it is harder to say, and they have been like high variance, but they put on a pretty solid run. At the Super Major, like sure they beat Na'Vi, but then they beat Mineski and then they beat Newbie, and those are like 2 big results in my opinion. And they lost the Secret, and the games they played against Secret, I think Secret just like the draft was super solid from them and the early stage. Like it was just one of those games that like you saw the draft for game 1, and I don't know if you guys watched it, but it was Lone Druid, Mirana, Rubik, Yapsor, just God, and it was versus Slark. And it just never got going for Vici. Like every rotation they made. It was also one of those Underlord games where they just like forced it. And in game 2, it was Legion Commander and Invoker for Vici Gaming. And I'm not like a super huge fan of Vici Gaming. Like I'm not a super huge fan of any unconventional offlaner right now. I think there's like a bunch that are like super solid, but it was weird for me to see them go for something like LC. Like I just don't. Maybe I'm a bit triggered because it's like the last quest I have for Kevin on that hero, and it's like it feels like such an awful hero. But yeah, like sometimes when you see teams trying something like that, it's super solid against Ember, sure, and Lucky and holding it in place. But it's just I wasn't super impressed with their drafting in that series. But everything else, they seem to have a good understanding. Maybe they went into that knowing that they have to do something special to beat Secrets. But nonetheless, I think Vici Gaming still very, very good. Just below it, so that's 5, and you wanted top 6, so it's pretty close.
Yeah.
For who's going to break in there?
Just to quickly get back to the eHome thing, to the Vici thing. I'm saying eHome because that's kind of the point I'm getting to. Is that one of the things that annoys me from LAN M teams is that, in my opinion, a lot of the drafts are either like hit or just really miss. It doesn't feel like there's something in between.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times I just see them completely outdrafting themselves. I remember TI8 eHome that wasn't against EG. It was one of the lower bracket games against, I think, Vici actually, was it? Yeah. Oh yeah, that's when they got eliminated. It's I don't know. For me, they happen to just where they sometimes draft themselves into a corner because maybe it's something that worked in a scrim or something, but they'll just randomly pull out heroes that I guess worked for them in the past, but it doesn't make any point or any sense on paper. Like they'll draft like a Warlock Kunkka combo, for example, for their supports, in a game where they definitely need at least some sort of like reliable disable or like some sort of save or whatever. It's just that sometimes it feels like they're drafting more for the players more so than for the actual team, and like that really annoys me because it just puts you at a disadvantage automatically. Like you force your players to like, well, you better win your lanes now, otherwise you're gonna really get fucked. And
yeah, I mean that's what happened to them in that game. I think it was like that was the game which was they only got 2 kills.
Yeah, something crazy like that.
I think it was they lost like 20-2, and it's like like exactly right. Like the wheels just fall off completely.
Yeah, and that's why I wouldn't put them in that like you said, basically that tier below the top 3. I would rather like Steven put them as
with the
tier or like I would definitely put them with the clusterfuck.
Because like here's the thing, I actually agree. Like in terms of pure potential, we were talking about here, like I think they are above the rest, almost the rest of like clusterfuck, and they've shown a bit higher consistency. But like their floor is like pretty iffy to me. Like basically, you're talking about like the draft, and like I don't think they are going to fix that inherent problem in the draft. Like I feel like if they could have, they would have already. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like, it's also very difficult to know though, because like, you know, when things are going weird, you kind of you fall back onto things that have worked for you or things that you're comfortable on, and that also depends heavily on whether those heroes are good or bad.
Yeah.
Like if Legion Commander was very good in the moment,
then maybe it would
you
worked,
fall back on that. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that it's like certain teams they just know they don't have a favorable matchup and they try to do something ridiculous. And when it comes to TI and you have a good group stage, which I think they will, when it comes to the good teams in the playoffs, they'll be okay.
Okay. It'll be okay. All right. I mean,
so that's 5. That's 5.
All right. So who's your 6th then? Give me your 6th. Because the 6th is the hardest.
Surprise. Yes, 6 is the hardest of what you've asked. I think I'm going to be a bit wild, and I'm going to say EG.
Okay.
I think that they have, in terms of like performance versus results. I mean, well, performance versus skill. I think that they're like very, very, very undervalued. Like basically, since they've had this big shuffle, they've really not had much time to do anything. They're a team that's very skilled. When they made unlike the OG change, is that like they brought back Thompson. I mean, they brought back Anna and then they brought in Thompson, and Thompson had Anna had experience with the other players in the team, but it also caused like a huge shuffle in everything else. You know, like how Sebastian's playing off lane and now No Tail's back to 5. So I think in many ways that was like super risky and huge change in how like the structure of the team. Whereas with this EG change, it wasn't as much. It was, you know, like subbing some players out, subbing some other players in. You know, it seemed like it
was like a 1-for-1 almost.
Yeah, and it's also there's like huge synergy with like in the same way that I was saying the Anna coming back was big synergy with the existing players. Like you keeping your Arteezy Sumail combo. You bring S4 in, who's got big experience with Arteezy, and also you bring in Crits and Fly as a combo, which I don't. Yeah,
it's like an underrated combo because nobody remembers it, but like that was a very good combo.
Yeah. And then you're also bringing in like it's like every aspect of it just makes it a good fit, I think.
Yeah. Like the only criticism I have of that is like I don't think Arteezy Sumail necessarily have that great synergy. Just in terms of their play styles and resources needed. Like, I don't think it's that great. But I agree. Basically, this team we're talking about, EG, is actually more OG than EG.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? And in that sense, like, that synergy is fucking great because that's what they lived off.
Yeah, I think the thing with Arteezy and Smail is they've had a lot of time to work, and like if there's one thing that you absolutely need on a team with someone like Arteezy and Smail is you need a person who's able to sacrifice himself, and that's really what S4 is like excellent as.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sumail moving into the off lane just meant that he was playing mid from a different lane.
Yeah, like I don't know why he thought that was an actual idea, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, and S4's got experience with this. I mean, when he played as mid in Alliance, he had the greediest offlaner in the game and one of the greediest safe lane players in the game, and he was able to deal with it. I think at the moment it just makes more sense to have that person in the off lane than it did back then. And both Crit and Fly play very, very selfless. So,
yeah, I actually think Crit should still get more resources anyway. But like he does play selfless, even though I don't think he should.
Yeah. I there's some heroes where he has a mission and he's like, I need a blink dagger. I don't care what you think. But like if this team doesn't work, then GG, Arteezy and Smail, because like if this team falls apart.
This is like this is the Hail Mary, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this is a team that has like the skill. They have the hero pool. They have the captain. I think Fly is like an unbelievable captain.
Yeah, one of the best in all of history, really.
And this team is like I don't want to like overhype them too much because in my opinion, they're still going to be dumpstered by the likes of Liquid and VP. They don't have enough time to gel together. But I think this is the type of team that could find themselves during the group stage and they could make it to top 6. And maybe they could beat Secret. Maybe they could beat Vici Gaming and top 4. I don't personally think that this is a team that's going to win the event, but I do think that they're a team that's very undervalued based on their historic performance. So that's my 6th team. I think they're better than Mineski as well.
All right.
But mostly for the reasons Skim was saying earlier about Mineski.
Yeah, Mineski's got some problems. All right, Skim. Who's your 5th and 6th?
They need a new manager. Oren's not good. I'm just...
Okay.
I actually got Optic and Fnatic.
Can you pass me your crystal meth or whatever you say?
So first of all, I don't believe in Vici for various reasons. I did see them at the Super Major, but in my opinion, I don't want to write it off as just an outlier, but I do think things were favorable towards them. Like you rated, for example, their wins versus Mineski and Newbie High, which I understand from your perspective, but from my perspective, that's like a win against Mineski, who in my opinion is just not a good team at the moment. I definitely don't think they were a top 8 team at that time at all. Maybe they've taken the time, like maybe they've been able to use the time off and become like a top 8 team again. But from what I've seen from them towards the end of the DPC, like ever since DAC, effectively, in my opinion, Mineski has been very trash. So that's why I don't really rate Vici's win over them that highly. And yeah, the win versus Newbie was good and was actually really dominant, but at the same time, Vici versus Newbie is probably one of the... You probably actually have a stat on that, but what matchup in this season was the one that occurred the most between two teams? Like, which teams have faced against one another the most? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Vici Gaming versus Newbie is actually at the top there, or at like a top 4 or 5 matchup or whatever, because they've played each other a lot of times. Pretty much every qualifier was between them up until LGD showed up, and that's why I don't really rate that win that highly either, because knowing between two teams, these matchups, they're very weird because they know each other and it becomes like a meta game between them where it's like, well, last time you picked this, now you pick this, let me pick this and ban that. And that's why I don't really rate that win highly either. So in my book, Vici Gaming is in that clusterfuck, and I don't think they're going to be able... Like, if I have to put them against either Fnatic or Optic, I think in 9 out of 10 cases, Optic wins against them, and in probably like 7 out of 10 cases, Fnatic wins against them. So for me, 5th and 6th. Optic is more of an underdog pick in that sense, where I like if I bet actual money on it, that's why I would pick Optic, because I think the returns would be that great, and I think they're not as bad as the numbers will make them up to be. But I don't necessarily think they're a top 6 team right now, but I do think that Optic is one of those teams, especially because they have PPD, is one of those teams that can sort of like over the course of the tournament become like a top 6 team, because they learn to understand both their opponents, the meta, and themselves as well. Whereas if I look at other teams, I don't see the potential to like develop over the course of the event. Like Newbie, for example, in my opinion, doesn't really have much room to grow anymore as a team in general. I actually think after this tournament they need to change no matter what.
I mean, I told them to change after last tournament, and they got second.
VGJ Storm. VGJ Storm actually has a lot of potential for growth, but I feel like they've been growing so steadily already that in my opinion, it's difficult to grow even further. Now that you've already like they've gone from like trash team to like really good team, like top 3 in A, probably maybe even the best in NA right now in terms of like individual matchups, or like second best, whatever. But I feel like it's difficult for a team like that to continue growing at like the biggest event. I almost think it's easier, quote unquote, easier to start off as like the hard underdog at TI and then grow into like a super team. If anything, a lot of times we've seen teams that have had like sort of like growth and or like getting rolling sort of like get crushed at TIs. That's why, I don't know, to me VGG Storm is not like a top 6 team right now, and EG, I actually think EG would be a more reasonable pick than Optic for like a top 6 finish for the reasons Ben lined out, and I totally agree with him. Like, to me, if anything, this is the EG team to make it, because like he pointed out, like how are you ever going to find like a better constellation surrounding RTZ and Sumail? But I don't know. I think in a direct matchup against Optic, maybe it's just my faith in PPD, but I think PPD is fueled by Salt, and he will make that top 6 finish happen. So that those are my two picks. And I think Fnatic is just, it's the perfect anime story. I legitimately think though that Fnatic is actually a scary team that is really difficult to face, because they have a lot of ways to approach the game that makes it really difficult to just take him head on. And I think in if you look at all the midfield teams, I think Fnatic can beat all of them, and they have Abed, who in my opinion is just like, if we voted MVP after this tournament, outside of like MVP would probably one of those top 3 team players, but outside of that, I think Abed is probably the best player right now.
So you wanted the biggest matchup of the season, Skim?
Yeah.
Fnatic TNC.
Oh, is it actually? All right.
SCA is a bloodbath, I guess.
And then it's Optic versus Complexity after that.
All right, I forgot about that one.
You guys fought them a lot of times, yes.
Yeah.
And then Newbie versus Vici, and then Optic versus Immortals, and then Mineski versus TNC, and then Optic versus DC.
Yeah, see, I wasn't surprised about that. Yeah, again, Newbie Vici, I should have actually seen Fnatic TNC coming, because before I made my argument, I actually quickly glanced at the Dota2 page and already saw like 4 matchups against TNC.
They play pretty often.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? Even if they play it pretty often, even if, like, say, TNC has, like... Does TNC actually have the upper hand in that matchup? I think they do, don't they?
TNC versus?
Fnatic. Who won most of them?
That's another killer fish.
Alright.
I have no clue.
Nah, either way, like, even if they did have, say, like, an 80% win rate against Fnatic, right? Which would be, like, ludicrously dominant. That doesn't necessarily mean anything at TI, because at TI it still matters how you fare against the other teams.
Yeah.
And I think Fnatic has that unique sort of, like, approach, because they have NA players, but then they also have, like, the SEA influence, obviously, with the
and they
SEA
also have
players.
Envy,
Yeah. It feels like, to me, Fnatic can beat a lot of teams. I don't think they can beat the top teams. I don't see them ever beating like VP or Liquid or LGD, but I feel like they can beat everybody else because they have those players. And again, Abed, in my opinion, is just one of the best individual players at this event.
TNC beat Fnatic 28-24.
Yeah, I figured.
And they never met on LAN ever, so that's another thing.
Yeah, that's that might change on LAN. All right. Actually, strangely, I have the exact same picks as Skim. I guess this comes from being on the podcast for so long. We might think similarly. But
you have minding.
But yeah, maybe. But my reasons are a bit different from his because I'm like, here's the thing about TI. I actually think outside of the most dominant teams, you should be gambling on underdogs and dark horses more often than not. And here's my reasoning is because mentally speaking, TI is very different from the rest of the tournaments in the Dota 2 calendar. There's a lot more pressure. It's a lot longer format, and like the higher expectations you have, the more likely you are to crumble. In a sense, if you get what I mean, like there's a reason like all those great teams we talked about earlier, like they all died off in their runs, and I think a lot. I guess not in the case of DK because like DK they couldn't find any practice partners, but in a bunch of other cases, it's just because they were like, it's because like they fell under the pressure, right? And so like I look at let's look at EG like because you made a great case for them like maybe being like even top 4 possibly right at this event, and I do agree with you they're completely undervalued because like everybody for whatever reason is like mistaking their current roster with the entire shit result of like last year. But like none of this team is completely different from that team, right? So it makes no sense to combine them. But when I look at these individual players, I look at Arteezy, has he ever performed for me at a TI? Not really.
I don't know. I think in TI5 he was their best player.
At a Secret?
A TF.
Yeah,
I thought Zai was their best player.
Okay, well, either way, I think it's like hard to say that he didn't perform super well. I think he did play. He
didn't play. He didn't like. He basically didn't do like a fucking resolution, I guess. In that
he wasn't like resolution level or
like
burning level.
Here's the weakness. Here's the weakness of Arteezy. Incredibly consistent, incredibly high skill level. Usually, I won't say it's the case this year as much, but I feel like previous years he's always been like at least top 5, right? Around that level of play. But I've never seen him like break the barrier of like consistently very good to Jesus Christ. He like solo carried everything and like broke through the entire like tournament by himself. In a sense, like I feel like that's kind of a weakness here, if you get my meaning, because like the potential ceiling isn't quite as high, and for whatever reason he doesn't perform as well as at these. Just in terms of results, obviously, like we're talking about a team game here, so it's not necessarily his fault. Like, because like I think there was like some podcast where like Charlie's like he might be the most unlucky player in all of Dota 2 or something weird like that.
He definitely could be. He
could be, right? But like obviously, like my contention with that is like he should have just spent the knee to PPD and then he'd be a much happier person. But even without that, like there's something that like. If you get enough chances, eventually the results will bear out, is my opinion. And he's been playing for a long, long time. So I'm not certain he actually has that level in him. But it's not like it's all him, though. We're going to keep going to the rest. So, Sumail, actually, I think he's pretty fucking clutch. So, I don't really necessarily have anything against him. I think he'll probably perform well if he gets his heroes. Like we talked about Windrunner. I think he'll probably be fucking sick here. Then we got to S4. And now S4 is 50-50. He's like...
TI winner.
TI winner, but also the guy who screwed up Secret.
Yeah, I mean, that was like just... It was like his only bad performance of the year, really.
Yeah, but like that's like an important like note because we're going to a TI again, which is, like I said, different from the rest. And when I think about S4, I think about his best performances, his best teams. It's always been when the team has had good team chemistry, right? Mm-hmm. Good team atmosphere. I think of OG, I think of Alliance, I think of Secret before everything fell apart. It's always been when everything was good. And so if this team hits a rocky point in this tournament, like I feel like this team has to like do a phase and like just front run the entire tournament for S4 to do very well the entire way. But if it doesn't do that, if it hits a Rocky's point, I feel like that is a concern for me for in S4's case, because I know like you look at everybody that's basically bailed out of EG in the last year, all of them talk about like how terrible it was. Like Zai's like, oh, this is terrible. Universe, this is terrible. Misery, this is terrible. Fear's like, I'm retiring. Oh wait, no, I'm going to Brazil instead. Like these, like they're there's something weird about this team. I don't necessarily know what it is, like, or why it is, but there's something weird about this team. And then we get to Crit. Actually, you know, I think he'd probably be pretty good here. In all honesty, like I feel like when this team finally realized he actually needed a 6 or 5 to play with him, and not like Misery turned into a 5 or Zai turned into a 5 or whatever. He's been great. And then the final contention, the final like problem I might have is with Fly, because I said I think Fly is like one of the all-time great captains, but like I'm thinking of all his TI results. I don't think none of them were that great when he was the captain. Am I wrong?
No, you're right.
No,
he's definitely had. I mean, he's always been part of OG, right? And OG has always shit the bed at TIs.
Well, I mean, he was also part of
Complexity.
Fnatic and Complexity
during TI5.
But
I mean, that was also with Swindles.
And it's like begs the question how much of a captain he was really in that team. I think one of the big issues I have with Fly, usually, or like if I had to point out like a weakness, I think is that his hero pool is not that deep.
Mm-hmm.
He tends to force certain heroes onto like his team basically because I mean he just feels comfortable with them and he knows or he thinks that they're really good, which definitely works out if they are good in the meta. Like Phoenix is like his go-to hero, and he is one of those players that sort of like establish heroes because he's so persistent in sort of like picking certain heroes. But if the meta really doesn't work his way, I feel like that's when OG has always been the weakest. Whenever like his hero pool is not really that doesn't necessarily line up with how you need to play the game, how you need to approach, for example, the lanes even. So I think that's one of the big weaknesses to look out for. Like right now, I actually think it's fine. Like going into this tournament, I think his hero pool is not going to be an issue. But that's the thing, right? We really don't know like how the meta is going to develop. Or like are lanes going to be more aggressive? Do they need to play more aggressively, or like heavy disables? Are those going to be in demand? Like how do you what do you need from your 5 position support? We don't know yet. But right now, I think it's fine. But in the long run, I think it could be an issue. And that's why, or that's also one of the reasons why I'm not necessarily that bullish on this team right now. But yeah,
I think they will get top 8, but like, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's basically what's going to be my point. I still think they're going to be like a top 8 team, potentially even top 6, and that's not bad at all. Like I think for this team, I think they should be happy about a top 6 finish, or like a top 8 finish, obviously. But I mean. Still, it feels kind of weird having players of Ortiz and Sumails or even Crit's caliber, S4's caliber, and basically question whether or not they're going to be like top 8, right?
Yeah, and like here's basically like my final point about this is like it feels brittle. This team, this lineup, like I think if things go well for them, it's gonna be fucking sick. They're gonna like dominate and like destroy everybody, but if they run into a problem. Whether that's internal, or whether it's like they get a bad matchup early on, like maybe they get like 5th and then somehow they draw like Liquid, who somehow got like top 4 seed or whatever, and they get to fucking destroy that. I think I might just straight up kill them. Like I think
it's actually harder this year to like, in some sense, to like fully predict where people are going to be rather than just like it's like so difficult every year really to predict how a bracket's gonna look.
Yeah.
But sometimes like the bracket corrects itself. So you're like, okay, they lost this, but I think they're still gonna bounce back and come through the lower brackets. This year is like
no, like you might not make it back, right?
Yeah.
You might not make it back.
I think everyone should just view this as like a single elimination year, really. Like there's such a high chance of running into a banger team.
Yeah, like outside of like the top 4 teams, I don't think anybody really gets a second chance. I think like every chance is like gonna be really fucking hard to win. So like
imagine you get like a team like LGD get knocked down to lower brackets with like some fluke upset. Because remember what happened last year? It wasn't a fluke upset, but first round of the winner brackets, IG beat Liquid.
Yeah.
And then Liquid just went and fucking destroyed people in the lower bracket.
Yeah.
They took out Secret, they took out Empire, they took out VP, they took out LGD. Like, it's just like, imagine you're poor LGD and you're like, I say poor LGD, but you lose to like Virtus Pro, right? Which was also relatively big upset. I want to say at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly how highly regarded VP were.
No, VP.
VP were considered
was
favorites,
one of
right?
VP was one of the favorites.
Yeah.
They were one of the favorites, but LGD was also like it was like a super close match.
Yeah, it was a very close match. Are we thinking of LFY or LGD?
No, I'm talking about LGD because LGD did very well in groups.
Yeah, because like both teams did very well there. So I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. So LGD did very well in their group, and they were looking solid. Like their team was, Ame, Somnus, 11, Yao, Victoria. Like they were solid. It was a team that had done pretty well coming into the tournament. They had to go through the qualifier though. They weren't one of the top 2 Chinese teams. That was IG and Newbie.
Mm-hmm.
And people were saying that IG were a bit overrated and maybe LGD could have got in, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So they lost there, and then LGD also has to go on this lower bracket run. So it's just like, imagine you're just getting sandwiched by LGD and Liquid just coming together. Like,
yeah.
In this case, it's like it's possibly even worse because if you get like one or two upsets in the group stage, you might be in a situation where Liquid, VP, LGD, one of them goes to lower bracket,
and like everybody's screwed, right? Everybody that means that is screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that's like part of the reasoning. It's like if you just look at this tournament specifically, like gigantic clusterfuck, and then like super dominant top 3, top 4-ish teams. Like I think EG are going to get tested. I don't think it's going to be a case where they can front run. So that's why I don't necessarily have them as high as you do. But having said that, like this team, EG, this might be the only time where like I think they should probably stick together. Post TI. Like every other time I think they should have split up. But I think this one they might want to stick it out. Alright, so basically that was a gigantic like offset. Like I was talking about like my 2 choices, Fnatic and Optic. So, like I said, I went with the dark horse picks because I think in general when you go to TI, like the way the pressure works out, like if you're a dark horse, you're an underdog with less expectations, you might do better, generally speaking. And we've seen that bear out a few times. We've also seen it like not work at all. Like we've seen some teams complete trash or go up. So basically, I'm just a gambler. I'm just doing the 50-50. That's why Eternal Envy's there with Fnatic, because you got to gamble sometimes. And just the way it's set up, like that Fnatic team, it's very interesting, I guess. Like I feel like the fact that they're like specifically trying to enable DJ and Abed, I feel like they have a very good chance because I think both of them are fantastic players, like among the best of their roles, right? So I think they have a pretty good chance. And as for Optic, I think it's just because of the way they set up the team. I have like a lot of faith in it, in the sense like nobody's really playing. No team strategy is based around trying to like get their offlaner to carry, like as Optic does with 3-3. So I feel like that will give them an edge, especially against teams that haven't played them before. And then you add in like PPD, very clutch, like one of the all-time great leaders. You add in Zai, one of the all-time great supports. I think Podcat's very good. I think Skim's right. Like CCNC is like the only guy. Like you look at this roster, it's like, oh, maybe he can upgrade there, but like he's been doing better. I think they have a chance, but like you said, they might be more meta dependent than any other team. So
yeah, like that's the thing is that if Broodmother is a hero which is like unbannable because there's other heroes which are like way better, and Optic always able to, like it's teams that like Meepo teams, team or Huskar teams. Broodmother's just one of those heroes that if it's a good hero and you can always last pick it, or then the other team has to last ban it. And that is just like a scary, scary situation. Like there's only a couple of teams that have got insane Brood players. I want to say it's just VP, Optic, and is that it?
Does Liquid have one? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, Matsuma does play it.
Kind of like. But
wait, we're talking about Broodmother, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Matoma is a really good Broodmother player.
Yeah, okay.
Like he.
So it's like VP, Liquid, and Optic who are like have insane Brood players. Like that's a nice group to be in. Like the top 2 teams and you.
Yeah.
I think that like there's certain also Meepo. If Meepo happens to be picked 5 times, it's gonna destroy people.
Yeah.
and
Shout outs to Fnatic.
People, yeah, it's gonna destroy some campaign predictions too.
Yeah, so like that's like basically like I'm betting it all on like very high, like a very high return, but I might just lose it on these particular two teams, right? Whereas like I think EG is actually a pretty stable pick if you don't want to buy into all the pressure stuff. Vici's a bit more gambly, but not as much as Fnatic and Optic. That's kind of how I look at it anyway. All right, so moving on, I guess we'll go to a secret. So obviously we all think they are below the top 3. So instead of doing that, I want to ask you, what is the winning condition for Secret to be one of the top 3? Like, how do they do it?
Did you say me or Skim?
Either one. I guess you go first since you responded first.
Yeah, you go first.
Okay, I think the win condition is basically having a draft that when you pick ace or mid one's hero right at the end, like your final call, you're not in a position where you're like, shit, do we have to pick Juggernaut here? You know, so many of Secret's drafts are like, they have such a solid opening, like they have a very well constructed opening, and then by the time it reaches the end, they just like, they've got like too many things that they need to deal with, so they just kind of split it down the middle and pick something that's like generic and, you know,
okay,
like,
against everything, but not great against anything.
Yeah, so when Secret have a draft and they finish the draft and you're like, shit, this is a good lineup. They've got good stuff. I feel so happy. Like Secret's win percentage in my head just goes up 10%. Because Puppy can basically play anything, but he's only very good on a small hero selection.
Yeah.
And it's the same with Ace. Ace can play, and mid one, both can play like everything, but they're only super good on a small pool. And when Puppy has a hero that he's good on at like the cost of giving an excellent hero to mid one or Ace, that's when I think it's like their team starts like shambling, and that's I think why I said Juggernaut, because very often it is Juggernaut that like they just like a Juggernaut like hero that they just end up giving to Ace right at the end.
Yeah, like the supers of ADs of the fucking carry position. Right.
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to TI, like they've had so much time to prepare now, the patch kind of seems okay. As long as we don't see any big shifts, I think that their drafting will be fine. I think at the Super Major, their performance was like super reasonable.
They landed exactly where they should have, basically.
Yeah, I was impressed with their group stage. They did drop a game to TFT. It was one of those games where they were trying some things out of team. I don't like PL against Luna as a matchup, and DK and Luna versus PL, I don't really like at all. But nonetheless, they were solid. They won the series. They beat VGJ Storm, who was an up and coming team at the time. They went through the winners brackets in beating Optic, then they lost to Liquid, and then after that they beat Vici Gaming and they lost to VP, and it was a close series. So that was the very long game, by the way, if you remember the VP series. That was the like 85-minute game one. And yeah, I think that they're a team which like splits it down the middle. They beat the teams they should beat. They lose to the teams they should lose to. For them to bridge that gap, it basically requires, like in the VP series, it requires them getting a draft that's very favorable. And I think their late game decision making is like some of the best. I think that both Puppy and Fata, Fata played in Cloud9, so he knows all about the late game.
Yeah, both of them play with Eternal Envy. They understand.
Yeah, I think that they basically, and also Ace played in like a really dog shit team for a long time, so going late game, he's very experienced, I guess. But I think that their team is filled with individuals who are very good at late game decision making. They always give mid one a highly scaling hero like when they give him a highly scaling hero, they're always in a solid position. So I think that their strategy should always be, like in card games, you have aggro decks are beaten by mid-range decks. Mid-range decks are beaten by control decks. Control decks are beaten by aggro. You have that like circle. And in that regard, I think that the way Secret wins against the top teams is by always just taking it super late.
But like
as late as possible.
But
like pick up.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say they just need to like effectively hold even, turtle it out, and then hopefully their late game decision making is good, because mechanically the top teams I think are better than them in certain ways.
Yeah.
And their hero pools are like slightly more favored.
Mm-hmm.
Like YAEP's was obviously mechanically brilliant. Mid one's mechanically brilliant, but I think Ace and Fighter are like a step down from Ramses and Nine Pasha, for example. Nine Pasha is very underrated. Yeah. Very, very underrated.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that the way they win is through strategy, not through individual like small skills and small mechanics.
Yeah. Like here's what I was gonna say is like if you use that analogy, then I'm pretty sure Liquid and Verse Pro are gonna play the aggro deck straight into Secret, so it's like pretty hard for Secret to put against them. But if you also follow that, like I think they might have a decent chance against LGD then.
Yeah, I mean, you like to take it late in many ways. Like almost all my companion predictions, where it was like most kills. It's like I'm thinking the way in which I think in my head to like come up with that is, you want to pick someone who's going to play long games, but they're still going to win lots of these games. So you're going to pick LGD. That's how I came up with a lot of that.
In general, that's also one of the reasons why Puppy has traditionally done really well against Chinese teams, because he understands how to play against them and like a really long drawn out games. Like Puppy, like when we talk about like China slayers, like for example, I think EG is one of the most recent examples. Like after TI8, I think PPD has sort of like become like one of those people that understands. Yeah, but I think Puppy in that sense is sort of like the OG China slayer.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could go even further to TI1 to Dota1 times, but I don't want to talk about that. But Puppy in general understands these Chinese teams and then like how they move and how to move against them. Like that 25 to like 40-minute mark, I think, is where Puppy really shines as a leader, because he understands how to like move the game around. And that's why I think. Yeah, like basically, like you guys said, if they play against LGD, I actually think Secret has really good chances. But like Liquid especially understands Secret so well that it becomes really scary. Like we've seen Secret beat Liquid, obviously. DreamHack, for example, was like a big one for them. But in general, I think Secret has the upper hand right now, just because I think on an individual skill, they're much higher level right now. It sounds weird because mid one, probably one of the best mid laners in the world, but it just feels like Liquid on every position is just finding their groove right now. Whereas if I look towards Secret, I actually think that both Ace and Fata have individual or have had individual problems throughout this entire season. I still think that Fata actually is a really good player for them, and like he's a really good shot caller, and I think it really helps to have multiple shot callers in the team like that, where you have like Fata as sort of like a secondary leader, because it really helps in the early. Both Fata and YAEP are obviously doing shit in the offlane. If Fata can just call the game from that position and like that early on, that makes the transition into the late game much easier for like Puppy, because then he like can basically it's easier to not have to like think of the entire game from like minute one. If you can basically focus on a couple of things and then take the game from there, I think it's much easier for him. So I think that's what makes Secret strong. But I think Fata just individually hasn't necessarily had the best season thus far. I think it's actually, in terms of individual performance, I would actually say it's probably one of his weakest seasons. Maybe it's just because he's the offlane. Like offlane traditionally is just not going to be as flashy and not going to be as strong as his sort of like mid lane performances, but just doesn't feel like it's clicking just yet. So obviously I'm saying this at like a very high level, right? I still think he's like,
because we're basically
a good player.
We're only comparing them to like the three guys you think are going to win. So
yeah, exactly. We're only like, I'm trying to compare them to like Nine Pasha, Mind Control, and Chalice right now. So like this is a comparison at a very high level. But like if I had to point out weaknesses, I think that would be the weaknesses for me. That's for like Ace as well. Granted, this is because what Ben pointed out earlier. Like if you look at their drafts, oftentimes they will just pick him something that they know he's going to be at least good enough at, but it's nothing he necessarily excels at, and that's sort of like it can backfire a lot of times if you just pick heroes that you know are going to be okay for like your team composition, or like are going to be good for your team composition, but only okay for the player himself. That can backfire a lot, and that's why I think Ace as well has not been the most sort of like standout performer at this team. Even though this was sort of like his, I mean, it is definitely his breakout performance this year.
But like,
yeah,
yeah, basically, I agree with most of what you said. Like the only question I have is like, is Puppy gonna do something fucking weird in the draft? That's like my biggest question. Like that's always been my question with like Puppy, because like remember that meme like when Sniper was the king or something. It's like and like that meme went around was like, ho ho, I'm Puppy. Like I don't ban Sniper because I'm cool. Like that's like my main concern with Puppy every single time I see him draft. Like is he just gonna do this just for the sake of it? Like because it's hard to read him because he's like super stubborn. And he has like very specific ideas of how to play this game, and it's what makes him a great captain. But sometimes it's like he might push it too far, but you don't really know when to tell him to stop. So, like in that sense, I think like Puppy is going to be the answer for this team if they want to like take out one of the top three, because it's going to come down to strategy and that's going to come down to drafting.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh,
right. So we finally go to the final three: LGD, Liquid, and Virtus Pro. And I think we all know everything there is to know about them. All three great teams. All three teams legitimately could all three of them. I think like nobody would be surprised if any of them won this year, right? Like,
nope.
All right. So here's my question: which of the three is going to win? Which of the three are you guys going to choose?
You're up first, Skim. I want to hear your dumb shit first.
I actually have Liquid. I believe in the defending champion. There's no ultimately. I don't think there's any good argument to make for why either of these three teams is going to win, really, because I think every argument that you make is going to be legitimate for either team. But here's my attempt at making an argument for why I think Liquid is going to be it. I just feel like they're out of the three teams, they're the most flexible. Like, no matter which way the meta is going to swing, I think Liquid is going to be the most adaptable in that regard. Let's say the meta is going to be like super aggro, right? Obviously, it's going to favor like Virtus Pro, but I think Liquid is a team that has shown me throughout the last 2 seasons that they are the most adept at being like, all right, we'll play this style, and now next game we're going to play that style suddenly. I don't think anybody else can switch up the tempo as much as Liquid can, and I think that's going to be very clutch in this tournament. But again, I feel like you can make a case for any team, really. I think in terms of individual skill, I don't really think that there's any outlier here. Like, I think the weakest, if I pull all 15 players from these three teams together, if I had to choose a weakest link, I think it would be Chalice, but that again, that's like at the super highest level right now. The role he plays
is like a bit different from Pasha and Mind Control too. So.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Again, yeah, like I said, playstyle, so that's not even like that fair of a comparison to make. And the teams obviously have different ways of how they play around their offlaners or how they play around their players in general. So it's not a fair comparison to make at all, and that's why I think these three teams as is right now, like, I feel like there's no good way of making that argument for either team. But again, my reasoning for why I chose Liquid is because I think they can switch up the tempo like no other team, and I think Kuroki, I feel like they've done the best, the steps necessary this season to conserve sort of like their drive and energy. Like, they've not been too hyper, they've not been trying too hard at winning events, and they've sort of like started not peaking, but they've started getting into the groove right towards the end, which is basically what you really need to do, right? And winning that super major sort of like proof that if need be, they can force it, and that's why I think they're the best team right now.
Yeah, so some stats before I make it call.
All right.
This season, Liquid has beaten VP 10 of 18 games, and LGD has beaten VP 8 out of 12 games, so 8-4. But Liquid versus LGD is 11-11, very close.
Yeah.
And they also remember that they met so many times at Epicenter. I think they played because Epicenter had like a million. It was actually a pretty solid format for the whole thing. It was like 2 groups of 6, and they play best of 3 round robin, and then it goes into double elimination. And yeah, so they were in the same group, so they played the best of 3 there, and
played winners, finals, and then grand finals, right?
Yeah, exactly. They played like 9 times that, and that was one of the weird things where like LGD in the group stage, LGD lost to Liquid 1-2, and then they 2-0'd them, and then they 3-1 them. So barring Epicenter, they've like not really met too much. Like that's like represents a big chunk of the times they've met. Like 9 of their 22 games have been at Epicenter.
Yeah.
And then at the Super Major, obviously Liquid 2-0'd them.
Mm-hmm.
So those kind of like rock paper scissors, except that the paper scissors is sometimes a draw. But I think it's like I think that one has to say that VP is the team that for the like almost the entire season looked the strongest.
Yeah.
And now right at the end, it's kind of like this like tussle that's happening. Like Liquid beat them 3-2, very close series, very big for morale. I don't know how that like the out of game stuff is going to impact the actual like team performance, team skill, team evaluation, because for the most part it's been like disgusting how close some of these series have been. Like it's literally boiled down at times to
a decision, just one.
Like one small decision. Like when we smoke, do we go left or do we go right?
Yeah.
And
because like these teams don't let you get back into the game, like they rarely do.
Yes. So for me, I would say that I would probably place VP and Liquid at almost equal pegging, and this LGD recent spurt I would say is just like a kind of flash in the pan. So that would make me put VP and Liquid above LGD.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I think you have to kind of give a small edge to Liquid. So Liquid would be what I would say is like statistically the best team.
But we're talking about like 50.01 or something crazy, like some small percentage.
Yeah, but that's the thing is like all of these matchups I would like never bet on. Unless
the odds were great.
No, I'm saying like, if the odds were great, I would. No, I'm not supposed to.
Okay.
Like if all the games were 50-50, I would not bet on any of these matches.
Mm-hmm.
Like the odds offered, I wouldn't bet on them.
Yeah.
Because I think that all of these matches are super. Maybe they'll change. Maybe throughout the tournament, one team will be clearly underprepared or make mistakes. But as it stands right now, if I like gun against my head, I would probably say I'd probably choose VP. But that's only because I think that they like when they're like all cylinders are firing, they are
the best team.
Like, they are like they're like I wouldn't say that I think all these teams are so close. I think just that they're the most driven. Like I think that they're hungry to get a victory. All of their players in their team, they would like absolutely want to win, and that's what that drive is what's going to keep them going on. And Liquid, they've already won a TI. I mean, Kura wants to win too, but you know, there's got to be some sort of difference in that hunger to win the first one versus we won last year. It's okay.
Maybe it's even greater.
Yeah, maybe it's greater.
No, it depends on the player though.
I don't think it's greater. But yeah, in terms of LGD, I think that LGD, we have like the least information about them. They're in the last couple of weeks or months, they're the team that has kind of come to the fore in the most, how to say,
dramatic fashion.
Way. Yeah, like they're the team that's on the up and up.
Mm-hmm.
But although they ended the season off, like the regular season off probably in second place, like from a rating perspective, like they were ahead of Liquid even at the end.
Yeah.
And it was VP who was number one. I think that I would just say that LGD is probably like of the top three the weakest. But it's like you said, it's like
49.5% to their whatever. Like that's not really. It's only weak in the relative sense. It's not weak in the absolute sense, right? So
I wouldn't be surprised if LGD go undefeated group stage, for example.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if like they just destroyed the event. Like they're at that level. Like, but I'm also wouldn't be surprised if like they took third and lost to Liquid and VP. Right? Like it's a very fun tournament in that sense. Like three super dominant favorites, but none of them are actually the favorite.
Yeah, there's no like true absolute favorite.
Mm-hmm. Right. So if I had to pick one team, like you guys said, I think there's arguments for all three. I'm going to have to go with Liquid, I think. And here's the reasoning: is I think they're the only team that have proven to me they can mentally grit through all of it among these top three teams. And what I mean by that is like Virtus Pro, they like when we think about TI7 for Virtus Pro, right? Because that's like 4 out of the 5 players are still the same, so it still has some relevance to what we're talking about here. They were surprisingly very composed. They played their game. Like I actually thought they were either the second or third best team at that event, depends on how you like look at it. And even though like they dropped out earlier because they ended up playing Liquid pretty early because Liquid dropped down, right? And when I look at it, I thought, okay, this team, like, they play at, like, their maximum level under pressure. But when I look at Liquid, and I remember that at that event, like, not only can they grow throughout the event, which they did at that event, but I think they actually played better at that TI7 than they did the rest of that, leading up to that TI7, basically. So, basically, under pressure, like, I think you put them in that place. I think Liquid might draw a little bit extra, and that might be like the difference here. Though having said that, you do bring up a good point. Like Virtus Pro, like they probably would be hungrier. Like it's hard to measure this. Like you can't measure motivation or drive or whatever. But I imagine getting the drive for first is generally more than getting the drive for second. Obviously, there's going to be outliers to this, like a bunch of the greatest winners of all time all have like that obsession with victory. But I look at Liquid, the only guy I think that's like that necessarily is Kuroki. I'm not sure about the other 4 yet, because like yeah. I know Kuroki's like that, but Virtus Pro has like 5 of those guys, right? So like it's hard. And then as for LGD, I don't really know their personalities. I don't really know what they're thinking, but like so it's hard for me to like give the edge to them one way or the other, because like this is the only factor I can think of that might swing things. So I'm slightly an edge towards Liquid, but I wouldn't be surprised if any of these 3 teams took it. Right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a cop out, but it's like I think in a lot of previous events, it's like whatever, it's super close. Like I'm just gonna say this or this or this, but I think this is actually an event where it is genuinely this close. It's like not people aren't just trying to take like the easy option here, you know?
Yeah, like this isn't like they're not equivocating. This is straight up like it's super hard to pick between these 3 teams, right? All right. Here's the final topic then. So, who was going to be the MVP of TI8? Most valuable player.
It's probably gonna be one of the players from like those top 3 teams, right? I feel like it's gonna be very difficult to find or to crown a person MVP that doesn't make top 3. And if we all agree that these 3 teams are likely gonna be top 3, it kind of has to be one of those players. I feel like the easy answer is always going to be Miracle, just because he is a very standout performer, even among these 15 players. Like, naturally, the way that Liquid plays around him and enables him makes him stand out a lot. But I actually think it's going to be Ramses, because I wouldn't be surprised if like VP just... I think VP is going to plow through most of the opposition, and Ramses is one of those players that not only can he like defeat you, he can crush you. Like he is going to... No questions asked. Like that's why I actually have him on as like top net worth, top like highest last hits, whatever. Like he is an insane carry player that just has no mercy. And he's just gonna. I mean, if we ever revive the Virtus Plow meme, it's gonna be because of him and like this current Virtus Pro iteration.
I mean, this Virtus Pro is more Virtus Plow than the other Virtus Plow. That's
actually a good point. That's why I legitimately think like he and since Virtus Pro is a top 3 team in my opinion, and I actually think they could even they will make the finals. I I see a world in which Ramses basically goes like 10-0-15 in like most games. Like that's the kind of player that I think he is right now, and that's the kind of player that I think Virtus Pro enables. Whereas Miracle, I mean, yeah, they do enable him, but it just never does feel like he's like out of control crazy. I mean, there are definitely cases where he's out of control crazy. Don't get me wrong, but for me, Ramses is just more consistently like the scary player to sort of like face. I very distinctly remember this kind of game where he's a Slark, I think, and he gets like pressured. He gets dual lane or whatever, but he still comes out on top into the last hits. Like Ramses is just a really good player, and I think, I think he's going to be the MVP.
So the thing is, the reason I would also go with Ramses is just because I've heard from people, variety of people who are close to him, but basically, you know how people say like, "Oh, we finished practice today. Let's go script like pub or something," and you know they'll go out, and even if you're a support, you'll play core. If you'll just do whatever. If you're a core, you'll just pick random mid heroes. You know, he's a high-ranking player on in terms of MMR. But what I've heard is that he's the kind of guy that he'll go and he'll play like a game and he'll play Lifestealer. You know, he'll play safe lane Lifestealer in a pub. Even though he's just played scrims with it every single time, he'll go play Lifestealer in a pub. And then he'll go and review a match, review a replay while he's waiting to queue. And then after the game's over, he'll just do it again. He'll play, okay, what's the best hero here? I need to practice my Lifestealer again. Yeah. He'll do whatever it takes to win, and he'll put like all of his effort into it. And he's super young, super dedicated. So yeah, I think it's
I mean, honestly, if I had to pick an MVP of this entire season already, it probably would be Ramses. So that's why I think it's a sort of like an easy pick to make for like TI.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry.
That makes sense. I will go with fuck it. I'll just go with maybe. Because here's my reasoning.
God.
Oh god. Right? If LGD win, it's gonna be because of maybe. That's my reasoning. Basically, like maybe enables the entire system to work, I think. So if LGD somehow beat Liquid and Virtus Pro, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, then I think it's gonna be off the back of maybe. In which case he'd be the MVP. So
no, that's a good pick.
So in that sense, like he's carrying the hardest load of like the stars of among each of the teams. So if he like performs at that high level, he's going to be the MVP. That's how I'd look at it.
Okay.
Right.
Makes sense. No, it does make sense. And I think again, I'm going back to the companion predictions. There was something like heroes with most kills or whatever. No,
I went with a very oddball decision there.
Oh yeah.
I went with a Queen of Pain because I think maybe his Queen of Pain is super scary. Like that dude just knows how to play that hero. And in general, I think maybe it's just one of those stage performers. Like he kind of has it been in like a playoff stage where he just didn't show up, where he just disappeared into the middle of nowhere. I can't remember one.
I mean, he's disappeared in the middle of nowhere on Chinese teams, but I don't know if it's been games.
No. But no, in general, I think maybe it's just a super high performer that's very consistent. I actually think SECC is less consistent than maybe in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's also probably why like newbie isn't as good, but like. All right, I think that about covers it. Should be. I think it's all the topics, but all right. If there's actually, yeah, I think that's about it. You guys have any shoutouts?
No, I'm good. Thanks for having me. Thanks to Ben for joining us.
Yep.
Feel free to join us more often if you have more time.
I'm very busy, but sure, great.
Yeah,
I'm a busy man.
Yeah,
I mean, you're not getting invited to events, that's for sure.
Yo.
Well, I mean, who am I to talk? I mean,
right. And then I will be at TI, so if you see me there,
all right.
come say hello.
Screw you, Steven.
All right, later.